Alright, what we're going to go through today is just the fundamentals of operating a precision rifle. I'm fortunate enough to get to shoot with some of the best shooters in the world, and we kind of all do it the same way. What I'm going to show you may be a little different than what you're used to, but I promise you this is the way most of the guys who are really good are getting it done. So we're just going to go through the basics. There's a couple of things to run a precision rifle that you have to understand. One is natural point of aim. Natural point of aim is really defined as the rifle pointed at the target and the shooter pointed at the rifle. So the first thing I'm going to do when I get behind a rifle is I'm going to look down range, and I'm going to basically point the rifle at the target so that the rifle's pretty much where it needs to be. After that, to create a good solid prone shooting position, I'm going to get perpendicular to the rifle to the path of the bullet. And then once I've got my knees squared up and I'm pretty much straight, perpendicular to what the direction the rifle's pointed, then all I've got to do to build the perfect position is fall forward and shoot my legs straight back. And with my legs pointed straight back, now what I'm going to do is take my rear support, which in this case is a good bean sock. I'm going to come in here. I'm going to get up on the scope. And you're going to notice that my right hand is really not even involved in the aiming process. I'm going to use my left hand and my bag to aim the rifle. Once I get the rifle pretty much where I want it, I'm pretty much on target right there. We don't want to put a lot of pressure back here on the rear of the rifle. The reason for that is the other principle that you really have to understand to shoot a precision rifle, and that is recoil management. Any muscular input I put in on the back of this rifle, the front of the rifle is going to move away from that. So if I'm pushing down with my cheek on the back of this rifle, the recoil is going to make the rifle want to jump up in the front. If I'm pulling left into my shoulder, it's going to make the front of the rifle want to go right under recoil. If you think about the reality of shooting a rifle, if we put this thing in a vise and we reached up and pulled the trigger with a piece of wire and we never touched the rifle, that's the most accurate this rifle would ever shoot. So the more of you put into this rifle, the more problems you're going to have. Essentially what we're trying to do as a shooter is minimize our input into the entire process. I like to say that my goal is to point the rifle at the target and try to sneak up on it and pull the trigger without it knowing I'm there. And if you watch the guys who are really good, the really good competition tactical guys, no matter what they're shooting, no matter what position they're shooting, that's pretty much how they go about it. It's all about minimizing their involvement in the rifle. So once I've got the rifle pointed at the target, I'm looking at the target dead center right now. Doing that with my hand, I'm constantly squeezing this rear bag. I'm going to put very little cheek pressure. I'm going to touch off just to get my cheek in the right place so that I can position my head the same every time, but it's going to be minimal cheek pressure for the reasons I've already discussed. And ultimately what we're trying to do when we shoot a rifle is we're trying to do it the same every time. So if I'm putting 5 pounds of pressure, say, just to throw a number out, if I'm putting 5 pounds of pressure on the back of the rifle and I'm off by 50%, I'm off by 2.5 pounds. If I'm only putting 1 pound of pressure on the back of the rifle and I'm off by 50%, I'm only off 0.5 pound. So it's just minimizing, you have to realize you're not going to do things perfect every time, but this way I'm pretty much minimizing my ability to screw it up. So I'm going to get up. I've got the rifle against my shoulder. I do not teach to load into the bipod. The reason I don't teach that is because a lot of places you shoot, a lot of the terrain that you're on, the bipod is not really going to be firmly into the ground. And you start loading energy into that bipod, what's going to happen? I just spent 5 minutes talking about how we don't want to induce any energy into the rifle. If I load into that bipod when this rifle recoils, there's a very good chance those bipod legs are going to spring. They're going to shoot forward and throw the front of the rifle up. So the only time you'll see me load into the bipod is when I've got I'm shooting off of a deck or some type of a structure where there's a rail across the bottom that's designed for the bipod legs to be loaded into, because then I know they can't move. And you can reduce some of your muzzle jump and all of that with that. But as a general rule, I don't want to induce any energy into the rifle, so I don't load the bipod. I've got the butt of the rifle very gently against my shoulder. The larger caliber rifles, you do want to make sure that it's against your shoulder. Once I've got pretty well aimed, I'm on target, everything's ready to go, I'm going to reach up and run the bolt forward. What I like to do is reach in and get my finger pretty well where I want it, and then I bring my hand in so that my finger determines my hand position. I don't have my hand up here somewhere, and now I'm reaching up here trying to get my finger on the trigger, which I can't do because my hand position is wrong. So what I like to teach is this knuckle should be able to touch the bolt handle. If you touch your knuckle there, your finger's going to be pretty well lined up with that trigger. Now, once I've got my finger where it should be, then I bring my hand in. You'll notice that I keep my thumb on the right side of the rifle. This is something you will see with almost 100% of the top 50 shooters in the nation in the tactical matches. If you wrap this thumb around and you squeeze this rifle, when you let off, I can tell you exactly what's going to happen. The scope is going to go down and right 100% of the time because you're pulling up and left. And so you're inducing energy, and that's going to cause you to have horizontal stringing in your shots. If you're seeing shots that are fairly consistent elevation-wise, but you're stringing left and right, it's almost always trigger squeeze and grip. So again, I'm aiming with my left hand. Finger comes up on the trigger. Hand position determined by finger. Because we've got a fairly tall bipod, I've actually brought some beanbags in under my elbow. So we've got the finger where it needs to be. I'm using these three fingers to just very gently, I mean probably a pound of pressure, pull back into my shoulder. So fingers on the trigger, this hand's very gently pulling. I'm going to take a deep breath, and I'm going to start back at the bottom of the exhalation cycle. This is a two-stage trigger, so I'm going to take the slack out of the trigger. Exhale. I'm going to tell my finger to start rearward. This is something that's a little tough to teach. But once I tell my finger to start rearward, my mind goes totally focused on my sight picture. I am 100% concentrating on not allowing that reticle to move relative to the target that I'm aiming at. So my finger, I like to say, is just on autopilot. Exhale, finger starts rearward. Hold through recoil, hold the trigger rearward at least a count of 1001. One of the worst things you can do is let on and off the trigger, you know, as you end up slapping the trigger, pulling back, letting off, pulling back, letting off. You see that with guys all the time. Before the bullets ever left the barrel, they've already induced movement into the rifle. So what we're trying to do is minimize the amount of movement between the time that the primer strikes and the time the bullet leaves the end of the barrel. That's why muzzle devices, muzzle brakes, suppressors, whatever you want to use, anything you can do to reduce recoil is going to increase your accuracy, because you're reducing the movement in the rifle, and the movement in the rifle that occurs between the time the primer is struck and the time the projectile leaves the end of the barrel. That's really what recoil management is. It's about consistently handling the rifle so that it does the same thing over and over again. And a lot of guys, and I guess, you know, it to some degree makes sense in your head, is you want to get up here and muscle the rifle up and really get on it, put your cheek into the back and pull your grip in, because you're trying to keep the rifle from recoiling. Well, the bad news is you're not going to do that. You're not strong enough to keep this rifle from recoiling. I don't care what caliber it is, it's going to do what it wants to do. So you're really better off minimizing your input, coming in light in a very hands-off kind of a minimalistic approach. And letting the rifle do the same thing. It's going to do what it's going to do. Your job is to make it do it the same every time. So if I minimize my input into the operation of this rifle, then the rifle mechanically is going to do the same thing every time. The powder, there's the same amount of powder in the round, the bullet's the same weight, the muzzle brake function is the same, so the recoil is going to be the same. So even on a 338 Lapua, even on a 375 Shy-Tac, I really don't muscle the rifle. I let it do what it wants to do. And I have been able to shoot some phenomenally small .1 groups with rifles 338 caliber and up. You know, you'll have guys tell you you can't do that. And like everybody else, I used to try to do it by muscling those bigger caliber rifles. And what I found out was if I would shoot them like I shoot the smaller caliber rifles, they will shoot just as accurately. So this is really the reality of how the guys who are really good, top level competition tactical shooters, this is how we run the rifles. It's not about, you know, trying to muscle the rifle, and I hear the term drive the rifle. I hate that term. We're not driving anything. You know, that makes it sound like you're a really important part of the process. This rifle has an inherent amount of accuracy built into it. The only thing the shooter's capable of doing is making it worse. You can't make it better. You can't make this rifle shoot better than it mechanically is capable of shooting. The way it was built, the way this is the rifle I built for Rex. You know, this rifle was chambered a certain way, it was cut a certain way, and the tolerances were what they were. And so all of that adds up to a maximum accuracy potential. The rifle has that potential. The only thing you can do is deter from it. So your job really is to just try to sneak up on this thing and operate it without it even knowing you're here. And once you grasp that concept, and I've taught hundreds of people to shoot using this methodology, not only will you shoot better, but it's a heck of a lot easier. You're going to be a lot less fatigued. You're not going to be fighting the rifle. You're going to, ultimately what I see is guys just enjoy shooting more because all of a sudden I've taken all the work out of it and all the stress. And so their groups, you know, get infinitely smaller and they enjoy the process much more. So I would strongly recommend you give this a try. It's going to feel a little bit weird the first few times you do it, but I think you're going to see that your group sizes are going to go down. I talked about horizontal stringing is typically going to be your trigger squeeze of your grip. Vertical stringing is almost always inconsistent head position and inconsistent rear pressure on the rifle and too much pressure on the rifle. So, you know, if you want to lay your head down, get on the couch. This is not the place to do it. What we want here is just a bare minimum of pressure on the back of that rifle. And I think you'll be shocked at how much more consistent you'll shoot once you start operating the rifle like this. As always, if you got any questions, please shoot me an email. Thank you for watching the video.